Okay, we are going to use our fraction and multiplication knowledge to practice conversions today. So remembering our steps when we convert measurements, we're going to first look at our problem. So for B, it's asking us to do 6 feet equals how many yards. So remember, step number 1 is to always figure out our conversion factor. So in this case, 6 feet equals how many yards? I need to remember to think about the fact that 1 foot equals 3 yards. That's my magic number. There's 1 foot and 3 yards. I'm looking at the relationship between yards and feet. My second step, which remember that we do, is we have to figure out which units are bigger and which ones are smaller and in which direction we're moving. So we need to look at big or small. So in this situation, 6 feet equals how many yards? Comparing the sizes of feet and yards, I know that feet are smaller than yards, which are bigger, because I know a foot is about this big and a yard is a yardstick, which is about the size of a kindergartner. So I'm going from a small unit to a big unit. When we go from a small unit to a big unit, we're going to divide. So we can remember that big to small. When you go from big to small, we multiply, and when we go from small to big, we divide. And that's because if you think about the fact that you have 6 feet, you're going to end up with a less quantity of yards, because for each of those 6, you're going to put them in groups of 3 and you're going to create a yard. So we're going to end up with less yards than we have feet. So we're going to divide. Now we're going to cross that section off and that multiplication off because we did it a little different than Mr. Habecker. We're going to take our 6 feet. We're going to divide it by our conversion factor of 3 to get our answer in yards. And I know that 6 divided by 3 equals 2 yards. If I wanted to show that in terms of a tape diagram, I could do the same thing, where I have 6 feet is my total, and I want to figure out how many yards that is equal to. Well, I know that every 3 yards equals a feet. So every 3 of these equals 1 yard. So every 3 feet equals 1 yard. I end up with 2 yards. So let's practice that again with E. 7 ounces equals how many pounds? So step number 1, conversion factor between ounces and pounds. Well, I know that there are 16 ounces in 1 pound. Step number 2, labeling big units and small units, ounces and pounds. Ounces are smaller than pounds. And going from a small unit to a big unit is again going to divide. So 7 divided by 16 is going to give me my answer in pounds. Now, you'll notice that this one is going to give you a fraction as an answer, and that is okay. We're going to end up with 7/16 of a pound. Because there are 16 ounces in 1 pound, I know my answer is going to be a fraction, because 7 is much smaller than 16. It's a little less than half. So 7/16 of a pound is equal to 7 ounces. Let's practice that again here. Pints and quarts. Step 1, figure out your conversion factor. There are 2 pints in 1 quart. Pints are smaller than quarts. So going from a small unit to a big unit, I'm going to divide. 4 divided by 2 equals 2 quarts. So 4 pints equals 2 quarts. And I can prove that with a model as well. 4 pints. Those are my 4 pints. Every 2 of them is going to equal 1 quart. So I end up with 2. So as long as we're going through our steps correctly and remembering that it is First step to figure out our conversion factor. Second step to label our big and small units, and then using those to figure out if we're going to divide or multiply. It'll help us with our math here. Let's practice with a word problem. Number 3, Sarah and her dad visit Yo-Yo Yogurt again. This time, the scale says that Sarah has 14 ounces of vanilla yogurt in her cup. So Sarah has 14. Her father's yogurt weighs half as much. How many pounds of frozen yogurt do they buy altogether? So I need to make careful note that they're asking for pounds and they want to know altogether. So when I think about what I know Sarah has 14 ounces, but her father, we don't know. We're given a clue though. Her father's yogurt weighs half as much. So when I draw my comparison diagram, it's going to be half the size of Sarah's. Well, I do know that half of 14 is 7. So I can say that Sarah has 14 ounces and her father's was 7 ounces. So all together, when I add them up, 14 plus 7 is going to be 21 ounces total. That's how much yogurt they have in ounces. My answer, though, wants pounds. So I need to say 21 ounces equals how many pounds? Well, my conversion steps, my factor is that there are 16 ounces in 1 pound. Ounces are smaller than pounds. So that means I'm going to divide. 21 divided by 16 gives me my answer of 21/16, because remember our division sign is the same thing as a fraction sign. So I can go from 21 divided by 16 to 21 over 16. And then I can simplify my fraction to be a mixed number because they do want my answer as a mixed number. I know I can take 1 full pound of 16 out of 21, and then it gives me 5 leftover ounces. So I get 1 5/16 as my final answer. And I can't simplify 5/16 anymore. So I get to stop here as 1 5/16 pounds of frozen yogurt. So converting is not that complicated as long as we remember to use our steps of identifying our conversion factor and then really looking to see, am I going from a big unit to a small unit or a small unit to a big unit, because that will change the operation I do, whether I'm going to multiply or divide. In this case, we're mainly dividing because all of our problems were to go from a smaller unit to a larger unit, and going from something like 16 feet equals how many, 6 feet equals how many yards. And we're able to say, well, each of those feet can be grouped together. Now you'll also see this situation, which you can also do it too. The example is in fractions. So they went from 2 feet equals how many yards, and thought about the fact that if this represents 1 yard and there are 3 feet in a yard, each one of these feet is really worth 1/3 of a yard. So another option, instead of dividing by 3, is timesing by the fraction, so timesing by 1/3. So you could see it both ways, where you multiply by the fraction or where you divide by the whole number. We've tended to divide by the whole number, so I say we just keep doing that same pattern and looking for those small and big units, but I want you to be aware that you might also sometimes see it as a times by a fraction. But that's okay, because we know that timesing by a fraction is the same thing as dividing by the whole number. We know that timesing by 1/2 equals divided by 2 because the fraction bar is really a division sign. Both of these things mean divided by 2.